Okay, so finishing up the trig introduction, we are going to, hold on, let me find that. Okay, we are going to use our calculator. So all of these questions here, you need to use with a calculator. Okay, if you do not have a calculator that has sine, cosine, and tangent buttons, I do provide one for you on the Schoology page. So if you go to the normal geometry page, you'll see it right here, right? Scientific calculator. You click on that, and then you have access to the sine, cosine, and tangent buttons here. Okay, so on this first one, I'm just going to go through one of these with you and have you try the others yourself. So sine of 72 degrees. So basically, we're going to figure out what is the ratio as a decimal. The calculator gives it to you as a decimal. What is the ratio as a decimal for sine of 72? Okay, so you simply hit the sine button. You do want to make sure that you're in degrees. So see in the middle here above the numbers, it says DEG. So if you have a normal calculator, a scientific, you should see DEG somewhere. That stands for degrees. So we're going to do sine of 72. And then you'll see on the right, that gives you this huge decimal. We are going to go to 4 decimal places. And you're going to round based on the 5th number. So in this particular case, you'll see 0.9510 and then 5. That 5 tells you to round up, so you're at 0.9511. Okay, so you look at the 5th number to know if you're going to round up the 4th number. So I go back and I got 0.9511. So that is going to be my answer here, 0.9511. Okay, you're going to do the same thing for these other 3, so please pause and try that yourself. Okay, welcome back. So your answer here should be 0.9659. Tangent of 57 is 1.5399. And then sine of 30 is actually just 1/2. So 0.5. And then to put 4 decimal places, you put the 3 zeros on the end. Those aren't actually necessary. You can just write 0.5. Okay, the next piece here is called inverse trigonometry. So inverse trigonometry. And you can recognize that because here I'm doing sine of x is equal to, and I'm given the ratio. So when I'm finding an angle, notice that I'm finding an angle, that is going to be inverse trig. Okay, so what you do for inverse trig is you use the inverse trig option on your calculator. So what that looks like, if you are on the Schoology calculator, you have to hit, so we're on the main menu, you have to hit func, stands for function. And what you see is that other trigonometry options pop up here. So now I have sine -1, cosine -1, tangent -1. Those are your inverse trigonometry buttons. If you're on a normal calculator, you have to hit second and then sine. Hit the second button and then sine, and that'll give you inverse sine. So first question here, I'm doing sine of x equals 0.6428. So you'll notice I can't plug in sine of x into the calculator, right? That doesn't make sense. That won't give me anything. So that's also a big hint on when you use inverse sine. Okay, so I'm going to do inverse sine and then plug in the ratio, 0.6428. Okay, so I hit inverse sine, and then I'm going to hit 0.6428, hit enter. Okay, and you'll notice you get 40 point blah, 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 blah. So for angles, your final answer in angles is just going to be the whole angle, the nearest whole number, which is in this case just 40 degrees. Okay, so this guy is just going to be 40 degrees. So again, you go to the nearest whole degree. So no decimal places on it. Okay, so you're going to try the rest of these the same way: inverse cosine, inverse tangent, inverse sine. Okay, welcome back. So you should have 60 degrees, 86 degrees, and 37 degrees. Okay, so that's the end of the first notes. The bottom part of this page we are going to skip. So let's open up the next notes. Okay, so here, here. And the next notes is this guy, so page 16. And these are the notes that I did in class. So I'm just going to erase all of this and go through it again with you. Okay, so you should have always at the top of your page write SOHCAHTOA. So do that at the top. Okay, so what steps first? Solving for a missing side in a triangle. So notice on all of these triangles, you're missing one of the sides. So what you're going to do is identify the angle, and you do that just by marking the angle. So like on number 1, I would just identify the angle. So that's the one I'm looking at, 33. And then you're going to identify its sides. And what I mean by that is you're going to do hypotenuse, opposite, or adjacent, right? One of those 3 options. Hypotenuse, opposite, adjacent. And you're only going to label the sides that have information on them. So I'm only going to label the x, and I'm only going to label the 14. So let's do that very quickly. So I'm looking at angle 33 degrees. And if I draw an arrow across the triangle, that is always the opposite side. So I'm going to label this opposite. Okay, the other easy one to figure out is from the right angle across is the hypotenuse. So this is the hypotenuse. So I labeled where I had an x with opposite and where I have 14 with hypotenuse. This third side would be called adjacent, but there's no information there, so I'm going to leave it blank. That'll help with any sort of confusion. So please leave the side without information, leave it blank. Okay, second thing you're going to do is set up the equation using trigonometry. So you're going to use either sine, cosine, or tangent, and depending on which sides you have labeled. Okay, so remember, sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, tangent is opposite over adjacent. So this second step here, I'm going to look at what I have labeled, and I have opposite and hypotenuse labeled. So what that means is opposite hypotenuse is sine. So I'm going to pick sine. Okay, opposite hypotenuse, I pick sine. So to write the equation, so we're going to set up the equation, with the trig function, you always put the angle. So 33 degrees would go with sine. And then we set that equal. And then on the other side is always going to be your ratio. And for trig equations, we're going to write that as a fraction generally. And you write it just like this, opposite over hypotenuse. Okay, so here, opposite is x, hypotenuse is 14. So I'm going to write x over 14. So here's my trig equation. So that's step 2. Okay, step 3 is now you're going to solve that. And you're going to use a calculator to solve that. All right, so I'll do it the long way first. So what you want to look at here, sine of 33. Okay, so I'm going to go over back to my calculator. And I'm going to hit sine of 33. And hit enter. Okay, sine of 33 is equal to 0.5446. So the fifth number is 3, so I'm just going to keep the 6. So 0.5446. So go back over here, and I know this is equal to 0.5446. And then I'm just going to copy this as it is. So here is my equation slightly simplified. And then from algebra last year, you probably or hopefully do remember if there is a number in the denominator and you want to move it to the other side, you multiply. So here, to get x by itself, I'm going to multiply by 14. Now, generally, we write that in front of this number. So I'm going to write it in front. So I'd say 14 times 0.5446 is equal to x. Okay, so I go back over to my calculator, and I'm going to write it just like that. 14, and then times, let's go back to the main here, times, okay, and then 0.54, so 0.5446, and hit enter. Okay, so what you'll see you come up with here is 7.6244. Now, generally for side lengths, we are going to round to the nearest tenth. So here we have 7.6 would be our final answer. So I'll go back over here, and this is going to be 7.6 is equal to x. Okay, and so that is for number 1. Okay, so on the next one, I'm going to let you try and do that on your own, and then I will go through it. So take a minute and try this one just like you did number 1. Okay, welcome back. So you're going to identify the angle. Okay, across from there is opposite. We're not going to label it because there's nothing given there. The right angle is across from the hypotenuse. So this is going to be the adjacent side. So adjacent and hypotenuse is cosine. You always put the angle with the trig, and then you write your fraction. So adjacent over hypotenuse. Okay, I'm going to show you a shortcut with the calculator. So this all stays together, and you can find a decimal, but you can also just multiply by 14 and then type in cosine 37. So what you can do is just write this in your calculator, and that will also work. Okay, so 14 cosine 37, I go over here. Okay, I'm going to type in 14, just 14, and then cosine 37. So you can do it all in one big step, like that. Okay, and then here you'll notice you get 11.2. So that 8 in the second decimal spot tells me to round up to 2. So 11.2. So here I get 11.2. Okay, last one here. So I'm going to go through number 3 a little bit quickly. So here's my angle, 61. I have hypotenuse here. This is opposite. I'm not going to label that. This is adjacent. All right, so adjacent and hypotenuse is cosine, and 61, and then 9 over x. Okay, so this is much more difficult when you have the x in the denominator. You are going to multiply the x to the other side, and then this whole thing stays together and you divide it. So you get 9 divided by cosine of 61. In your calculator, you are going to do 9 divided by cosine, so cosine 61. And you get 18.6. Okay, so this is going to be 18.6. Okay, the last one, if you try it, we can go over that if you need to.